Hello and a very welcome back to the DoneDeal YouTube channel. I'm David OC and today we're reviewing a car that has come all the way from Japan. Now this is the Mazda 3. It's a hatchback and in my opinion is absolutely drop dead gorgeous. Now the standard competitors to this car would be something like a Volkswagen Golf, a Ford Focus, a Seat Leon, but most importantly the Toyota Corolla, because Mazda have been very clever with the engineering to make it a little bit more efficient. But more on that later on. Now prices for the Mazda 3 start at about 28,500 euros. However, this one, well, it's got an extraordinary amount of spec, making it cost over 37,000 euros. Now, should you want to look up Mazdas for sale in Ireland from some of DoneDeal's trusted dealers nationwide, then hit the link on the top right hand corner of the screen and we'll get straight into the review. So let's talk about the styling, because actually this, in my opinion, is the best looking car in its category. So at the front, you've got a lovely grille, and what I really like about Mazda is no matter what way you spec it, it stays the same. It's not like an Audi where when you get an S line, it's got a completely different grille to another spec option. Then on the side, we've got these lovely 18-inch alloys. They sit quite well. Now I do think they maybe get a little bit lost on the rear panel. And take a look at the side profile. Now, to me, it reminds me an awful lot of the Mazda MX-5 hardtop. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that long nose. However, from the rear, I think this is my favorite angle. So over here, the spoiler is black to blend in with the privacy glass windows. Then these tail lights are absolutely stunning. And then, hallelujah, Mazda are not joining the trend and we have two real exhausts that both work. Now, the interior, my oh my, is it stunning in here. So, to give you a bit of background, one of my good friends worked for a long time in a Mazda dealership, and he said that their rule of thumb was bums on seats. If you can get the customer in the car out for a test drive, they almost always convert. And I get what he was saying. The finish, the feeling in here is far superior than some of the top known premium brands. The finish here, this soft touch leather, it's so nice. The steering wheel, it reminds me a lot of a BMW, however a little bit thinner and also a little bit smaller, actually a nicer size. The gear stick, the way it feels, we'll talk about the gearbox when we go out for a drive. Everything is really, 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 I can't stress it enough, really impressive in here. So let's talk about storage. You've got storage in here, which is nice and accessible. You've got a USB charging point and a 12-volt socket, drink holders up here, a normal size glove box, door bins on the side. So it's all very functional. Now this, it is a special edition Mazda, and we'll get to that in a while, but that gives it electric seats, all the bells and whistles, including heated steering wheel, heated seats, every bell and whistle you can ever imagine, even when it comes to driving aids, is in this car. And personally, I adore the burgundy red seat. I'm going to go ahead and say that's the colour it is, and the floor mats, it looks absolutely fantastic. That leads us into the infotainment system. Now, it works really, really well. It has all the usual inbuilt sat nav, the radio, all the stuff that you're used to using, and in terms of functionality, it's all controlled down here. There's nice shortcuts, there's home buttons, a nice swivel wheel. It's not touchscreen, which you may or may not like. I actually don't mind it, and I hate smudges on my screen, so actually it's kind of nice to not have it. But it has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and just like every car, once it has that, it becomes so intuitive. It's the same in every car you get into. It works super easy. It is strange using it from a kind of twisty thing down here. I'm used to just pressing phone or pressing maps, but you will get used to that. One tiny drawback is that you still need to have a wire to use Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Now in something like the Volkswagen Group, they're doing away with the wires and Apple CarPlay is actually wireless. In the rear, the first thing that I notice is it's a little bit darker than some of its rivals. And I think that's to do with a few things like the black headlining, the darker upholstery, and of course the privacy glass windows, but also to do with that sloping rear end. And I think what happens there is it actually gives you a smaller window so less light gets into the car. That said though, it isn't actually terrible in headspace. I mean, it's not massive, and compared to something like a Golf that's a lot more boxy, it is a little bit tighter up there, but knee room's really nice and the seats are much more comfortable than a Golf. There's an element of, it feels a little bit special in here, whereas a Golf just feels like you're in another Golf. Now, in terms of practicality, where you've got a folding down armrest, which is handy as it's going to be a little bit tight with 3 large passengers. You've got some drink holders, and of course, if your rear passengers are only little babies, the Isofix points are really easy to get at. However, Mazda's taken Audi's approach and given you these clip-off Isofix protectors that you will 100% lose. So if you're buying one of these second-hand, I would be shocked if these are in it still. But other than that, as a whole, in the rear, it's actually quite nice. Well, hello and welcome to May in Ireland. It is currently hailstoning, but we're going to crack on with the review, and we're talking about boot space. So, calling a spade, the boot is a lot smaller than a Golf or a Focus or a Leon or even a Corolla. However, it does have some kind of nice features like this rubber mat here, which is really nice, and there is a false floor which you can just pull up at the touch of a toggle, which I'm struggling to get right now. And you've got a little bit of storage units and things like that. And the seats fold in a 60-40 split, meaning if you need to carry some larger items, you can fit them in nice and easily too. Now let's go for a drive. So to drive the Mazda 3, it's most comparable to a Golf because I've spent a lot of time in the Golf. And I have to say, there's certain things that are maybe a little bit less intuitive. Things like the controls here on the steering wheel are a little bit harder, but I think after owning one of these for a while, you get very, very used to that. But things that are better, this gearbox, it is phenomenal. The throws are so short, but it really just locks into each gear and feels really, really nice. The car itself, the way that the suspension is set up, it feels very planted. The steering wheel is lovely. And then you've got all the driving aids. Now this is the 100th edition Mazda 3, so it's there to celebrate 100 years of Mazda. They started out making cork. Yes, cork, like the things that bung a bottle of wine, and now they're making cars. And it's all down to this fascination of engineering, and that's what Mazda's all about. So when it comes to driving aids, this 100th edition blows it out of the park. So you've got radar controlled adaptive cruise control, you've got lane assist, amongst many other nice little bits of technology, meaning the Mazda 3 is as nice to drive as many of its competitors. When it comes to engines, Mazda have discontinued the 1.8 litre diesel and are only supplying the Mazda 3 in a 2 litre petrol. Now, you can get that with 120 horsepower, and you can also get it like this one with 183 brake horsepower. Now all these engines are available in manual or automatic. Generally, I'd say go automatic, but in this particular scenario, I'm going to actually suggest that manual gearbox. And in fact, this 183 brake horsepower engine is quite interesting. The Skyactiv-X brings some slightly more fascinating engineering to the Mazda 3. So the first one is more common, which is that it has a mild hybrid system. Basically, long story short, there's a 24-volt electric motor which uses its power to start up the car a little bit more efficiently than an old-fashioned starter motor, and it also switches the engine off when you're slowing down to a halt once you pass about 20 kilometers per hour. And the second part, and you're going to have to forgive me, but I'm going to have to read this because it is a lot of words and I'll explain it afterwards. It uses a world's first technology called spark-controlled compression ignition, which burns less fuel than a conventional petrol engine but makes more power. It produces fewer emissions but drives better performance than a regular petrol engine. And then it goes into a load of things. Effectively what it does is it merges the technology of a diesel engine with compression, and it uses that for the low revs driving, and then it uses the old-fashioned spark plug technique for the higher revving driving side of things. Hopefully that makes sense. I could geek out on it for a long time. It's very difficult to completely comprehend, but long story short, it makes the car more efficient, it makes the car a bit more pleasant to drive, and it's something a little bit different that if you were to buy it, you could sit in the pub and explain to all your friends. Now what all that means is that at low revs, driving around town, it's not only fuel efficient, but it's also quite easy to drive. There's no major torque, it's very fluid as it goes about the road. However, should you get on a back road, it's not going to blow your socks off, but when you get up in the revs, you get a nice noise, high revving, and it's actually quite fun. Pair that with that gearbox that is fantastic, and as a driver's car, it actually becomes very, very enjoyable. We've come to the point in the review where we discuss some of our favourite and least favourite things about the car we are testing. Now we'll start with the latter, and one of my least favourite things about the Mazda 3, but it is becoming more and more common in many cars, is the lack of spare wheel. I just think there's nothing better than driving around with that security of a spare wheel in your boot. That said, Mazda does come with roadside assistance. My only other bone to pick with it is that it would be quite nice to have a mode selector. So for example, you could put it in sport mode and it would sharpen up the steering, increase the throttle response, and then put it back in eco mode for some motorway driving. There are many things that I really am fond of on the Mazda 3, and randomly enough, one of them is the 4 little lights inside the rear tail light on the indicator. I just think that attention to detail is absolutely amazing. Another thing that I absolutely adore is the purity that the Mazda 3 has. Now just bear with me, the real exhaust, that is really nice to see. The manual gearbox, the way it feels is absolutely phenomenal. Then having the high revving petrol engine, not buying too much into the future, is a big plus in my books. Now don't get me wrong, it does have the mild hybrid system, it does have a very unusual engine, but I do really like that they're keeping it as pure and driver based as they possibly can. So there you have it, that is DoneDeal's review of the Mazda 3 100th edition. And Mazda being around for 100 years is amazing to see. They've been making cars for the last 60, and I have to say, my friend's analogy of getting bums on seats is definitely one that I will highly advise. So if you are considering buying a new Golf or a Ford Focus, don't forget about the Mazda 3. Maybe hop down to a local dealer and go and test drive one and see if it's the car for you. And if you are looking for dealerships near you, then hit the link on the top right hand corner and you will be able to see all the Mazdas for sale in Ireland from over 1,000 trusted dealers. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
I wish to be me.